Sarah sacrificed everything for her son Michael, raising him alone and enduring humiliations in silence. But instead of gratitude, what she receives is the cruel distance from the one she loves most. As he indulges in a life of excess and tries to erase his roots, Sarah seeks the strength to move forward. But when dark secrets from the past threaten to destroy their future, how far can a mother's love endure? The sun slowly set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, as Sarah sat at the kitchen table, lost in thought. The soft light illuminated the walls covered in photos, capturing moments from a life filled with challenges and sacrifices. The young woman who dreamed of being a writer was far from her ambitions. In fact, she saw herself more as a survivor, fighting through the emotional turmoil that had accompanied her since her teenage years. "You'll never be anything, Sarah." Her mother's voice echoed in her mind like a shadow that wouldn't let her be. It was a phrase that had haunted her for years, a constant pressure that suffocated her dreams. The warmth of memories enveloped her, and she found herself transported back to the past, to the fights that erupted in the home where she grew up. Her father's screams mingled with her mother's, creating a symphony of discontent. The desire for freedom pulsed within her, but the chains of obligation kept her tethered. "One day, I'm going to get out of here and write about all this," she promised herself as she watched life unfold outside the window. But reality soon imposed itself. At 19, Sarah was kicked out of her home. The scene was vivid. Her mother's face twisted in anger, the cruel gesture that sent her away. "You're no longer welcome here." Those words still resonated in her ears, and she remembered the loneliness she felt when she crossed the threshold for the last time. With tears in her eyes, Sarah found herself alone, pregnant and unsupported, in a shelter for single mothers. The place was cold, but warm enough to offer shelter and food. There, in the silence of the night, she gave birth to Michael, her son. The baby's cries broke the darkness and brought a new purpose to her life. "I promise you'll have a better life," she whispered, wrapping the little one in her arms. Joy and fear intertwined, and she knew she wouldn't turn back. Years passed, and Sarah worked hard to give Michael everything she never had. Juggling 2 jobs, she balanced her responsibilities as a mother with her creative aspirations. Sometimes, in moments of exhaustion, she would sit at the kitchen table, a notebook in hand, trying to write the stories that bubbled in her mind. "Mom, are you writing about what again?" Michael would ask, his curious yet somewhat dismissive gaze piercing her heart. "I'm just putting my thoughts on paper, dear. One day you'll understand," she replied, trying to hide the sadness she felt at her son's lack of support. In a support group for single mothers, Sarah opened up to other women facing similar battles. "I just want him to know that love is more important than any label," one of them said. And Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of what she couldn't express to Michael. During one of those meetings, Sarah shared her hopes and fears. "I think he's growing up and distancing himself from me," she confided. "I feel like he's ashamed of me." The other mothers looked at her with empathy, understanding the pain she carried. "You need to show him that love has nothing to do with status or money," suggested a friend. "He needs to know that you'll always be there, no matter what." Her friend's words echoed in Sarah's mind as she tried to build a better future for Michael. But like the sun that hides behind the clouds, she knew the challenges were far from over. The relationship between mother and son, marked by sacrifice and unconditional love, was about to face its toughest test yet. Michael was caught in an endless cycle of parties and social gatherings, a new world that contrasted starkly with the life he had known with his mother. He sat at a cafe table in the university, surrounded by new friends boasting about their lavish lives. The loud music and laughter echoed around him, yet something inside felt empty. That day, he looked at his friends and felt like an intruder in his own life. "Hey Michael, you have to come to Jake's party on Saturday. It's going to be epic. The hottest girls and all the rich kids will be there." Lucas, one of his classmates who always encouraged him to join in, exclaimed. Michael forced a smile, but couldn't shake the feeling that his mind was drifting back to his mother and the nights she worked hard to tell him inspiring stories before bed. He remembered how he used to lose himself in the pages of the books Sarah read to him. Sarah Reith, like The Little Prince. That seemed so distant now. "Sure, I'll try," Michael replied, though his voice lacked the enthusiasm he tried to convey. Meanwhile, Lucas's gaze drifted to a girl passing by, and he turned back to Michael, eyes gleaming. "Dude, you have to loosen up. Look at her. She's perfect for you." "I don't know, man. I'm thinking about other things," Michael answered, averting his gaze, feeling a growing pressure in his chest. Stepping away from the group, he decided to go to the university park, where he used to spend days with his mother before things became complicated. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and the smell of freshly cut grass brought a wave of nostalgia. He sat on a bench and took his phone out of his pocket, hesitating to dial Sarah's number. The idea of talking to her felt as distant as the universe. What would he say? That he felt lost among everything he had achieved? Deep down, Michael felt ashamed. He remembered the times Sarah had to work double shifts to ensure he had what he needed. "I can't be seen as the son of a single mother anymore," he thought. But this affirmation left him distressed. He felt trapped between the desire to please his new friends and the love he still had for Sarah. That same afternoon, he decided to visit her. Sarah was at home, organizing books on the shelf, when she heard the door open. Her heart raced when she saw Michael walk in, but the joy was quickly replaced by apprehension. "Hi, Mom," he said, his distant tone making Sarah feel a little disappointed. "I just stopped by to see how you're doing." "Hi, my love," Sarah said, trying to hide the sadness in her voice. "I'm doing well. And you? How's college?" "It's fine," he replied, not bothering to conceal his disdain. "Actually, I'm a bit busy." Sarah felt a pang in her heart, remembering the boy who used to run around the house, full of energy and dreams. "You know you can always count on me, right?" She tried to get closer, but he stepped back, as if an abyss separated them. "Sure, Mom. It's just that I don't want to be the topic of conversation among my friends," he confessed, his face turning red. "They don't understand my life. I don't want them to know who you are." Those words cut Sarah like a knife. "But I'm your mother, Michael. I'm the one who raised you and gave you everything I could." "Yeah, but you don't understand," he shouted, frustration spilling over. "I just want to be normal, have friends who care about me, not about what you did with your life." The tension between them grew, and silence fell. Sarah looked down at the floor, trying to hold back her tears. "I just want you to be happy, my son. You know I love you." Michael turned away, unable to bear the weight of the emotions. "I need to go," he said quickly before walking out the door without looking back. When the door closed behind him, Sarah sank onto the sofa, solitude enveloping her like a heavy cloak. She didn't understand how her son, who had always been so close, now saw her as a stranger. The love she felt for him seemed to fade, replaced by a deep and painful emptiness. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. Blank sheets of paper lay before her, waiting anxiously for the words that couldn't find their way out of her mind. She hesitated, her hands trembling, as she stared at the blank page. The emotions overwhelmed her, and each sentence felt like an impossible challenge. The love she felt for her son was immense, but the pain of rejection suffocated her. "Why is it so hard, Michael?" she murmured to herself, remembering the look of disdain he had given her on his last visit. "I just want you to know I'm here for you." With a deep sigh, Sarah picked up the pen and began to write. "Dear Michael," she started, her words coming to life on the paper. "I know things aren't easy between us. I feel like you've distanced yourself, and that hurts more than you can imagine." With each line, her vulnerability became more evident. "I want you to know that I will always be here, no matter what happens. You mean everything to me." As she wrote, Sarah recalled Michael's graduation party, an event that should have been filled with joy, but was marked for her by a sense of exclusion. She remembered the excitement in the air, the laughter of Michael's friends, all so different from her. When she saw her son in his new outfit, surrounded by his achievements and people who felt so far removed from her life, her heart tightened. Yet, he ignored her, as if she were a shadow unworthy of notice. That night, after the party, silence filled the house. Sarah sat on the sofa, staring at the wall, reminiscing about Michael when he was little, when he looked at her with admiration and love. "He must not feel that way about me now," she thought, a tear rolling down her cheek. The weight of abandonment was crushing, and the idea that her son was ashamed of her hurt deeply. The next morning, anguish still accompanied her. Determined to try one last time, Sarah placed the letter in an envelope, but hesitated before sealing it. "What if he doesn't care?" she thought, distressed. "What if he tears it up and throws it in the trash?" Insecurity consumed her, but at the same time, she knew she had to try. After all, a mother's love knows no bounds. Meanwhile, Michael was navigating his new life at university. He felt pressured to fit in, to be part of the glamorous world surrounding him. At the graduation party, he had let himself be swept away by the atmosphere. But now, in his room, the shine of that night seemed to have faded. He looked at the photo he took with his friends, a forced smile on his face. "I don't want this," he thought, a feeling of dissatisfaction growing within him. But the presence of Jake, his new friend, always pulled him back into that superficial life. "You need to have more fun, man. Leave that single mom story behind. No one cares about that," Jake had said, laughing. Michael laughed along, but inside he felt guilty. "Why can't I just forget?" he wondered. That night, as he went out with Jake, the tension between them was palpable. "Just don't become one of those guys who lives off a sad story," Jake teased. Anger surged within Michael. "You don't understand anything about me," he shouted, frustration exploding. "You don't know what I've been through. My mom, she's always been there for me." The truth hit him like a punch to the gut, and the intensity of the emotion left him speechless. At the same time, Sarah decided she needed to confront this situation directly. She could no longer let Michael's pride stand between them. That night, in a moment of desperation, she picked up the phone and tried to call him, but the call went unanswered. The pain of not getting a response echoed in her heart. The next day brought a new opportunity. During a moment of anger, Michael decided he needed to confront his mother. He sought her out, and the conversation that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and repressed feelings. "Why didn't you let me be who I want to be?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "I don't want to be the son of a single mom." Sarah, feeling the wound reopen, replied, "Michael, I did everything I could for you. I just want you to know that I love you. I'm your mother, and I always will be." The tension between them felt almost palpable, and the space that separated them was charged with hurts and frustrated expectations. Maybe you should have tried harder to understand me, Michael shot back, his words cutting like a knife. Sarah felt each word hit her like a blow, but she refused to be defeated. I just want what's best for you, she replied, her voice soft yet firm. And I will be here, no matter what you choose to do. As the emotions intensified, a heavy silence hung in the air. Both stood on the brink of an abyss, unsure whether to take a step forward or pull away even further. Sarah looked through the fogged glass of the cafe, raindrops running down the window like tears, mirroring her emotional state. The atmosphere was cozy, with the aroma of fresh coffee and the soft murmur of conversations in the background, but she felt anything but comforted. This was her last attempt to reconnect with Michael, and anxiety pulsed in her chest. Clutching a book of poetry in her hand, one he used to love as a child, she took a deep breath, trying to calm the thoughts that tormented her. When Michael walked in, the energy of the room seemed to shift. He carried an air of disdain, his uninterested gaze and rigid posture evident. Sarah felt her heart tighten at the sight of him, so grown yet so distant. The young man hesitated at the entrance, as if about to back away, but finally approached. "Hi, Mom," he said, devoid of emotion. The formality of his greeting struck her like a knife. "Hi, Michael. Thanks for coming," Sarah replied, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. "I brought something for you." She lifted the book, a timid smile on her lips. "I'm not interested in books, Mom," he cut in, his eyes quickly darting to the cafe menu, as if reading the options were more appealing than the conversation unfolding. The pain of his words hit her, but she fought against tears. "I thought you might like to remember. When you were little, when we used to read together." Michael sighed, impatience evident in his tone. "That was a long time ago. I'm not that kid anymore, Sarah. I have a life now." The way he pronounced her name without the mom echoed in her ears, a cruel reminder of her new reality. "I know you have a life and are building your future, but that doesn't change the fact that I am your mother." She forced her voice to remain steady, even as insecurity threatened to overwhelm her. "I just want to understand what's happening with you. I feel like you're drifting away from me." "Because I am, Mom. Don't you get it? Look at you. Look at us. I don't want to be seen as the son of a single mother, someone who always had to struggle." Michael's frustration exploded in words, and Sarah felt the blow hit her like a punch to the stomach. "I never wanted you to feel ashamed of me," she said, her voice faltering. "I did my best to give you a better life. I just wanted you to know that I love you, no matter what." Michael crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "Love doesn't pay the bills, Sarah. Love doesn't change the fact that I'm different from my friends. I'm a work in progress, and you're not part of that." The rain began to pour harder outside, and Sarah looked out the window, the drops hitting the glass like echoes of her sadness. "Please, Michael, don't exclude me from your life. I'm here. I've always been. Let's talk. I want to hear what you have to say." He shook his head dismissively. "You can't just enter my life whenever you want and expect everything to go back to how it was. Things have changed." The silence that followed was heavy, an abyss between the two. Sarah felt despair take hold, each unspoken word weighing down like an anchor. "If you don't want to listen to me anymore, then maybe I don't have anything else to do here." Her voice trembled, and she realized she was about to cry. And then the rain turned into a storm, and Sarah's tears began to slide down her face. "I just wanted to have a moment with you, a moment where you could see me as your mother again." Michael looked at her, his expression softening for an instant. I don't know how to do that," he confessed, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. But before he could finish his thought, a lightning bolt lit up the sky, followed by a rumble of thunder, interrupting the already tense atmosphere. "I just wish you could hear me," Sarah said, the pain evident in every word. The encounter that should have been a step toward reconciliation had turned into a painful silence. Michael, with one last glance of compassion, turned and left the cafe, leaving Sarah alone, surrounded by the sound of rain and the feeling of loss, as if the world had crumbled around her. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she held the still warm coffee mug. Morning light filtered through the curtains, creating a soft pattern on the wooden floor. The smell of fresh coffee couldn't dispel the pain that had consumed her since the cafe meeting, where Michael had turned away from her with disdain. Memories of that moment tormented her mind. She recalled the cold look in her son's eyes, the way he had walked away just as the rain began to fall. Now, loneliness felt like an unbearable weight in her chest. With a deep sigh, Sarah decided she needed to channel that pain into something productive. Her heart longed to reconnect with Michael, but the rejection still stung deeply. She grabbed a notebook she always kept nearby, its blank pages crying out for words yet unwritten. Without hesitation, she began pouring out her feelings, each word heavy with emotion. "Why can't you understand, my son? I fought so hard for you," she wrote, tears streaming down her face. "I will always be here, even when you don't want to see me." Writing became a form of release, a space where she could express her anguish without fear of judgment. After a few hours, Sarah realized she needed more than just words in a notebook. She remembered a support group for single mothers she had attended years ago. It had been a network of strength and encouragement, and maybe, just maybe, she could find support again. With her heart racing, she called Carla, her friend from the group. "Hi, Carla. It's Sarah. I was thinking, does the group still meet?" Carla's voice, always full of energy, rang out on the other end of the line. "Hey, Sarah. Of course, we have a meeting tonight. You should come. I've been missing you so much." Carla replied, her excitement evident in her tone. "You need to share how you've been. It'll be great for you." "I'm okay. I've been thinking about some things. Actually, I need a bit of support," Sarah confessed, feeling a little vulnerable. "Come on, you'll feel better. I promise." Carla's insistence had a comforting effect on Sarah. She hung up the phone, feeling a glimmer of hope blooming in her heart. Later, at the gathering, Sarah sat in a circle of chairs, surrounded by women sharing stories of struggles and triumphs. Carla was by her side, smiling and encouraging her to speak. When it was her turn, Sarah took a deep breath and began to share. "I don't know how to reconnect with my son," she said, her voice trembling. "He just graduated, and it feels like his life no longer includes mine. I just wish he understood how much I've done for him, how much I love him." The other women listened intently, some with tears in their eyes. One of them, Anna, who had faced a similar situation, spoke up. "Sarah, it's hard when our children pull away. But you have to remember that the love you gave him is irreplaceable. He may not see it now, but one day he will." Anna's words touched Sarah deeply. She felt a weight lift from her shoulders. That night, she realized she wasn't alone in her pain. There were other women who understood her struggles. After the meeting, Carla pulled her aside. "You need to value yourself, Sarah. You are a strong woman, and you shouldn't let Michael's rejection define you. You have an incredible talent for writing. Why don't you try publishing your stories?" Sarah hesitated. "But what if no one cares? What if I fail again? And what if you shine? You'll never know until you try." "Life is about taking risks," Carla replied with an encouraging smile. Those words echoed in Sarah's mind as she walked home. The path was lit by the city lights, and Sarah felt a spark of determination beginning to ignite within her. She needed to rediscover herself, not just as a mother, but as a woman. Upon arriving home, she sat down with her notebook again. This time, she wouldn't just write about her pain, but stories of hope, love, and overcoming struggles. And so, as the night deepened, the pages of her notebook began to fill with words, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt she was on the right path to rediscovery. Michael threw himself into his new life, where parties and excess became his reality. The vibrant nights filled with loud music and flashing lights were a temporary refuge for a young man who, inside, carried a growing emptiness. At one of these events, he looked around, observing his friends laughing and having fun, but a strange feeling began to settle in his chest. He sat down in a corner, away from the crowd, as the music pulsed like a constant reminder that something wasn't right. "Hey man, what are you doing just sitting there?" Jake appeared, a drink in hand and a mocking smile on his face. He always seemed to know when Michael was down. "You've got to enjoy yourself. Look at those girls, they're into you." Michael forced a smile but couldn't shake the thought that haunted him. "I just don't feel very well, Jake." "Oh, don't give me that. You need to loosen up. Come on, let's dance." Jake pulled Michael into the middle of the floor, where people moved in ecstasy. But dancing didn't bring the relief he expected. Watching the happy faces around him, he felt increasingly out of place, as if he were watching a movie without being part of it. Later, as the party continued, Michael stepped away, seeking a quieter corner of the bar. He leaned against the wall, trying to organize his thoughts when he heard a familiar voice. "You don't look like you're having any fun, Michael." It was Carla, a college friend who always had a knack for getting straight to the point. She approached, arms crossed. "What's going on? You look like a zombie." "It's just, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm living the wrong life, you know? All of this feels so empty." Michael stared at the drink he held, the taste already dull. "It's like I'm trying to fit into something I'm not." Carla raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what do you really want? You're just mimicking others." "I don't know," Michael replied, frustration evident in his voice. "I just wish my mom were here. I pushed her away, and now I don't know how to turn back." "You should talk to her. It's not too late. That pride will only hurt you." Carla's gaze was firm yet gentle. Michael let out a bitter laugh. "Talk? She's so far away now. I let her down because I was ashamed of our origins. But that doesn't define who you are. Your past isn't a death sentence for your future. How you feel about it is what truly matters." Carla stepped closer, her empathy almost palpable. "You need to face this." Those words echoed in Michael's mind as he walked away from Carla, back to the party. He looked at Jake, who was surrounded by girls, laughing and having a good time. The life he was leading felt so devoid of meaning compared to what truly mattered. This disconnection made him feel a lump in his throat. When the music shifted to a soft ballad, he remembered a photo he had seen days earlier. It was an image from his graduation, where Sarah was smiling proudly in the audience. The memory of her face hit him like a punch in the stomach. He had always felt guilty for not giving her the attention she deserved. "Why are you so deep in thought, Michael?" Jake appeared, this time with a more serious tone. "You're doing it again, aren't you?" "Doing what?" Michael asked, trying to mask his vulnerability. "Isolating yourself. That just drags you down further. You have to enjoy life, not just lament it." Jake shook his head, as if trying to expel the weight that Michael carried. "Maybe I don't want this life anymore, Jake," Michael said, challenging him. "I don't know if it truly makes me happy." Jake laughed, but there was a thread of concern in his voice. "So what are you going to do? You can't just abandon everything." It was a question Michael couldn't answer. He felt trapped in a dilemma. On the outside, he was surrounded by laughter and music, but inside, a storm of emotions consumed him. The pressure to be someone he wasn't was becoming unbearable. The emptiness wouldn't disappear just with parties and excess. It was time to face reality, and perhaps seek the forgiveness he so desperately desired. Sarah awakened to a new phase in her life. After the painful encounter at the cafe, where the distance between her and Michael felt insurmountable, something within her had shifted. She decided she could no longer let sadness consume her. Writing, which had always been her refuge, became her new passion and purpose. With the help of a support group she attended, Sarah began sharing her experiences on a blog. The words flowed from her pen like a river finally finding its way after years of being dammed. She wrote about being a single mother, the challenges of raising a child alone, and the promises she made to herself in the shelter where she gave birth to Michael. Her posts touched on universal themes: love, pain, sacrifice, and the search for identity. Over time, her chronicles began to attract readers. Encouraging comments flooded her inbox, and she felt recognized and valued, as if she were finally fulfilling her dream of being a writer. On a sunny afternoon, while revising one of her texts, Sarah received a notification that caught her attention. A new comment had been added to her latest post. It was from an anonymous reader praising her courage in sharing her story. But it was the last sentence that truly impacted her. "Your texts make me reflect on my own relationship with my mother." That phrase resonated in her heart, reminding her of Michael and his need to understand her struggles. Meanwhile, Michael, who continued his life of excess, found himself in a state of restlessness. He was surrounded by friends, but the joy he once felt at parties now seemed like a mask. One night, after a raucous party, he sat alone in his room, surrounded by empty bottles and echoes of laughter in his memory. It was then that, on a whim, he decided to open his computer and look for something to distract him. What he found was Sarah's blog. As he read her texts, Michael froze. His mother's words spoke directly to him, as if she were right in front of him, sharing her stories with a sincerity he couldn't ignore. "She was always more than I thought," he murmured to himself, feeling a wave of guilt and longing wash over him. He read about the difficulties she faced, the sleepless nights, and the dreams sacrificed. With every paragraph, his heart ached a little more. How could I have been so blind, he thought, recalling the disdain he had shown her. Michael couldn't understand how he had allowed himself to be swayed by appearances and distanced from what truly mattered. The final line of one of Sarah's pieces hit him like a punch to the gut. Motherhood is an act of love that transcends any pain. He felt tears welling in his eyes, a mix of anger at himself and a burning desire for reconnection. Determined to learn more about Sarah's life after their separation, Michael began researching literary exhibitions. He discovered that one of her stories would be showcased at a local gallery. The idea of seeing her work displayed filled him with anxiety and excitement. He needed to know more. He needed to find a way to apologize and, perhaps, rekindle the relationship that had been broken. "This is it. I'm going to find her," he said aloud, as if convincing himself. He knew he couldn't remain passive while his mother was struggling and reinventing herself. Reading Sarah's texts not only touched him, it was like a call to action. From that moment on, he committed himself to reestablish contact and seek a reconciliation that seemed distant, but now pulsed within him like renewed hope. The atmosphere of the exhibition was filled with soft lights and the gentle murmur of visitors' conversations, creating an intimate ambiance. Sarah's works, carefully displayed, captured the struggle and resilience she had experienced. Each painting and each text reflected her journey. And while many admirers were absorbed in her creations, Michael's gaze was fixed on a piece that looked familiar. The title of the artwork, Blood Ties, hit him like a punch to the stomach. As he admired the piece, a familiar presence approached. Sarah's heart raced at the sight of him, and emotion enveloped her like a cloak. Michael, now a man, bore traits of his father, but his eyes were unmistakably Sarah's. The tension between them was palpable, a mix of love, pain, and resentment. "Hi, Mom," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, but the words came out as a trembling whisper. "Hi, Michael," Sarah replied, her voice nearly faltering. "You came. I thought I should see this." He gestured to the artwork, but his gaze quickly diverted, unable to sustain eye contact. "You did a good job." "Thank you," Sarah said, a shy smile blooming on her lips. I wanted you to understand what I went through, what you mean to me." "It's complicated, Mom. You know we're not exactly close," Michael replied, his voice hardening. "I don't know if I can just ignore everything that happened between us." Sarah took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the pain of his words. "I know, my love, but we can't forget that we are family. We always will be. I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you, even when everything seemed difficult." He shook his head, his eyes finally connecting with hers. "Love is not enough. You don't understand what it was like for me. All those looks, I was always the teacher's son. I just wanted to be normal, like everyone else." "I didn't want you to feel this way," Sarah said, her voice choked with emotion. "I just wanted to give you a better life. You are the only thing I have. I just want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always be here for you." "But you weren't," Michael shot back, frustration evident in his tone. "You were busy trying to be a writer, trying to start over, and I was left behind." "I didn't know how to deal with everything, Michael. I was trying to find myself too. I made mistakes, but I always wanted what was best for you. I never wanted to lose you," Sarah pleaded, feeling tears welling in her eyes. In a moment of vulnerability, Sarah pulled an envelope from her bag. "I wrote letters to you. I never had the courage to send them, but I'd like to read one to you now, if you allow me." Michael hesitated, defensiveness giving way to curiosity. "Letters? Why didn't you give them to me before?" "Because I was scared," she admitted. "Scared that you wouldn't want to hear it. Scared that you didn't care anymore." He looked at the envelope, and for a moment time stood still. "I want to hear, Mom." Sarah opened the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. "Here's one of them. Michael, if you're reading this, it's because I finally found the courage to open up. I want you to know that every sacrifice I made was for you. I remember your first smile, your first step. You've always been my pride and my hope. No matter what happens between us, I'll be here, cheering for your success and your happiness." Sarah's words echoed between them, and Michael felt a wave of emotions. The feelings he had suppressed for so long began to surface, but he hesitated, struggling against the vulnerability that threatened to overwhelm him. "Mom, this is a lot for me," he murmured. "I know, dear, but please don't forget that I am your mother. I will always be here for you, no matter what happens," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unsaid words. They were both on the brink of something profound, but the barrier that separated them was still an abyss. Michael felt the struggle within himself, but fear and anger still held him back from taking the next step. "I need to go," he finally said, his voice laden with emotion. Sarah nodded, heartbroken. "I understand, but please, think about what I said. I love you, Michael. I will always love you." And with that, he turned and left the gallery, leaving Sarah alone with her words and her unreciprocated love. The rain began to fall outside, and she felt each drop as a symbol of her sadness. Yet, even amidst the pain, there was a seed of hope beginning to sprout in her heart, the possibility of a new beginning. Michael looked around the gallery, the walls adorned with his mother's artwork, each piece representing a fragment of her soul. He felt trapped in a maze of emotions, lost between admiration for the woman he had always known and the pain of the separation he had chosen. The words he read in her blog impacted him deeply and unexpectedly. What had once seemed like a distant life now appeared more real, raw, and full of meaning. He stepped away from the superficiality surrounding him, questioning whether he was truly happy in the life he had chosen. Sarah's eyes brightened upon seeing her son, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling, "I'm glad you came." There was a mix of hope and fear in her heart. She didn't know how he would react, but she felt this was a crucial moment. "I didn't know you were writing. What you wrote made me think." "About us," Michael replied, his defensive tone still evident. He looked at the paintings, trying to avoid her gaze. The silence between them was heavy, laden with years of unspoken words. "I just wanted you to know how I feel. How I've always felt," Sarah said, taking a step forward, her voice stronger now. "I never stopped loving you, Michael. Never. But you don't understand. I don't want to be seen as the son of a single mother," he shot back, frustrated. I just can't deal with this. With what you went through, with everything. I was just a kid, and you weren't there when I needed you. I was doing the best I could. I worked hard to give you a better life, so you could have opportunities I never had. I didn't want you to feel ashamed of me," Sarah replied, pain evident in her voice. She remembered the sleepless nights, the tears, and the sacrifices. "I did everything for you." Michael was overwhelmed by a flood of feelings. His mother's words echoed in his mind, mingling with the image of Jake and the pressure he always felt to fit into a world that wasn't his. "You don't understand. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to be like everyone else," he said, his voice choked. "And I thought distancing myself from you was the answer." "Michael, there's no such thing as normal. Everyone has their own story. And yours is beautiful. You are talented, intelligent. You don't need to be ashamed of me. I am your mother, and I will always be here," Sarah replied, her eyes filled with tears. "What I want is for you to be happy, whatever that means for you." The sincerity in Sarah's words began to melt the barrier Michael had built over the years. He felt a tremendous weight lift from his chest, as if a part of him was finally beginning to understand what truly mattered. "I miss you, Mom," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "I didn't want things to be this way." She smiled, a sad but sincere smile. "I miss you too. Every day. I just want you to know I'm here, willing to rebuild what we lost." "But how can we do that?" Michael asked, looking into Sarah's eyes, searching for answers that felt so distant. "We need to be honest with each other. Talk, without fear. No matter what happened in the past, we can start over. One day at a time," Sarah suggested, her heart hopeful. Michael hesitated, but her words resonated in his mind. He knew there was much to reflect on, but the desire to reconnect was strong. "I can't promise it will be easy, but I will try," he finally said, determination starting to take shape. "That's all I can ask for," Sarah replied, a mix of relief and hope filling her being. She extended her hand, and Michael hesitated for a moment, but then took it. It was a small gesture, but it signified the beginning of a new chapter. As the lights of the gallery sparkled around them, they both felt that, despite the scars and pains of the past, there was a future ahead filled with possibilities and perhaps a deeper reconnection than they had ever imagined. Sarah was nervous but resolute. The bar was crowded, the music loud, and conversations echoed amidst the noise. She knew Jake was a bad influence in Michael's life, but she had no idea how deeply he had infiltrated their son's mind. With a determined look, she approached the table where Jake was sitting with some friends, laughing and joking. The atmosphere seemed light, but the tension inside Sarah was palpable. "Jake," she said, her voice firm but controlled. He looked up, surprised to see her there. The friends fell silent, sensing that something was about to happen. "We need to talk." "Look who decided to show up," Jake replied with a sarcastic smile. "Shouldn't you be at home waiting for Michael to come back to you?" "I'm not here to argue with you," Sarah said, ignoring the provocation. "I'm here because you're manipulating my son. He deserves more than this empty life you're offering." Jake raised an eyebrow, defiant. "Manipulating? You're exaggerating, Sarah. Michael is an adult. He makes his own choices. And if you haven't noticed, he's happy with the life he's living." "Happy?" Sarah almost laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Do you really think he's happy distancing himself from me? Hiding from who he really is? You and your stories of sacrifice and overcoming challenges, that's just a burden for him. He wants freedom, not your life lessons." Jake crossed his arms as if trying to shield himself from the truth Sarah was trying to impose. "Freedom?" Sarah repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You call it freedom to distance himself from family and forget who he is? You know he never wanted that. You're just using Michael for your own satisfaction." At that moment, one of Jake's friends stood up, but Jake held him back with a gesture. "Stay out of this, man. This is a personal conversation." "It's not personal, Jake. It's about my son's life," Sarah insisted, her determination growing. "And if you keep this up, he's going to get lost. You have no idea what he really needs." Jake then decided to go on the offensive. "Do you really think you're the perfect mother? What have you done with your life? Gave up your dreams to be a mediocre teacher, and now you want him to follow in your footsteps? What life are you offering him, huh? A life of frustration?" Sarah's reaction was instant. "You know nothing about me. I did the best I could, and even if I made mistakes, I always loved Michael. And you, on the other hand, just want to use him as a pawn in your game. Do you think you can intimidate me?" Jake laughed, but there was a hint of nervousness in his laugh. "I know more about you than you can imagine. And if you keep threatening me, I might expose everything." Those words cut Sarah like a knife. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her heart racing. Jake's revelation could be devastating. "I know about your past, Sarah, your troubled youth, your expulsion from home, and I'm sure Michael would love to hear how his mother isn't so perfect after all," Jake said, his smile widening as if he had a victory in his hands. But before Sarah could respond, Michael entered the bar, his expression focused and serious. He immediately sensed the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone demanding. "Michael, Sarah began, but Jake didn't let her finish. "I was just explaining to your mother that she doesn't control your life," Jake said, shifting the blame onto Sarah. "She thinks she can manipulate you, but you're a man now." "Enough, Jake," Michael said, his voice firm. "You're out of my life. I don't need you telling me who I am or who I should be." "You're really going to choose this woman over me?" Jake asked, incredulous. "You don't know anything about her." "I know more than you think," Michael replied, his gaze hardening. "She's my mother, and despite the mistakes she made, she's always been there for me, unlike you." Sarah looked at Michael, feeling a wave of emotions. He was finally standing up for her, defending her. The weight of the past seemed to begin to dissipate. "Michael, she started again, but he interrupted her. "I don't want to hear from you anymore, Jake. You're pushing me away from who I am, and I'm not gonna let that happen." Michael's voice was filled with determination. Jake, realizing he had lost, turned to leave. "You're going to regret this, Michael. I'll always be around." "No, you won't," Michael said, his voice firm. "I don't want you in my life." As Jake walked away, Sarah and Michael locked eyes, both breathing heavily. The tension still lingered, but there was a new understanding in the air. "I'm sorry, Mom," Michael said, his voice softer. "I distanced myself and was an idiot. I never wanted you to feel this way." Sarah moved closer to him, tears in her eyes. "I just wanted you to know that I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Michael hugged her, and in that moment, the bonds that had weakened began to rebuild. The future was still uncertain, but they were ready to face it together, strengthened by the truth and the love that, despite everything, had never disappeared.